Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Spin Legal on October the 30th, 2024. This is episode 40 with Angela Browne and myself, and we are partners at Invictus Legal LLP. And tonight our topic is actually given to us by a listener. So our topic is with rape or sexual assault. How come being drunk is treated differently for men than for women? And okay, so
always an interesting question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and let me just correct the error. So it's rape or sexual assault, right? And show this a bit back again with a corrected thing. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So first of all, if you need to contact Angela or myself at Invictus Legal, you can do so on 905-688-5598, or contact Angela at Angela@WeAreInvictus, or myself at Peter at WeAreInvictus.legal, and contact our website, which is WeAreInvictus.legal. There you go. And as I said, today's topic has been provided by a listener, and the question is, with rape or sexual assault, if a man and a woman are drunk, how come a man and a woman are treated differently? And for clarification in this one, so that nobody's going to get clarified, for this, for us, this is a theoretical discussion because paralegals cannot represent for these types of cases, for these types of criminal matters. However, both Angela and myself have studied criminal law as part of our LLB studies.
Yeah.
Right. So make that clear.
Pretty soon we'll boost Peter up as a lawyer, and then he can talk about it all he wants.
So essentially, it's important that we explain about the different approaches between men and women in this area, because I think there's a lot of difficulty, and let's be blunt and honest up front. Rape, as we all know it, but in Canada it is called sexual assault. Mm-hmm. No, it's called aggravated sexual assault.
Yeah, aggravated sexual assault with a weapon. There's various types of sexual assault, and even sexual assault that doesn't involve penetration is still called sexual assault.
Yeah,
as a common type of sexual assault. So I mean, there's various ranges in that type of severity and of the offense that's put in there, but we don't have an offense called rape in the criminal code.
Yeah, but in fact, what most people know as rape is aggravated sexual assault in Canada. Yeah. So there are differences between how men and women are treated in respect of rape and sexual assault. So one instance is that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe under criminal law, no woman can actually be convicted of performing a rape.
Well, I mean, there have been women who have used objects and have done this forcibly, but it's not a common thing for women to be charged with that.
But if a woman took a man and forcefully had sex with him, well, I think there's a psychological difference here, because probably in the 99% of cases, the man's just going to go, yeah, okay, great, I had a freebie there.
That's like if they ask you whether your sex is male or female, the men put yes.
Whereas men will say, hey, that's okay, I had a freebie there. Women will go to the police or a rape counselor or something.
Exactly. See, the actual act of consent is very different. Like, I think men, if they don't want to do it, I think they're pretty clear. Say, stay away from me, or just that's it.
They're walking out. They're walking out the door.
Right? Yeah, they're walking out the door. They kind of say no, and but if there's a situation where they're in there, like, consent is often implicit, and I don't hear too much about men feeling that they've been raped by a woman.
Yeah.
Okay? I've seen some cases where there was sexual harassment by a woman of a man.
Yeah.
Okay? But that is a different thing.
Well, that actually is a very different thing, and we'll come on to some cases of that
Yeah,
later.
that's usually saw in civil cases, and I've actually handled a civil case like that where
Yeah.
a man was complaining about a woman sexually harassing him in a workplace, and that's more of a power differential.
Yeah.
Even under a criminal context, sexual assault is looked at as a power differential, as opposed to any kind of sexual release or whatever it is, because it's always about power and aggression.
Okay. So to get into the particulars of the question we were actually asked, it is why, if a man and a woman are at a bar and they're both drunk and they decide to go have sex, and subsequently the woman wakes up in the morning and goes, holy moly, I had sex with him, rape, rape, rape. How come for a man being drunk is considered an aggravating factor, yet for a woman it's considered a mitigating factor?
Well, there is a case, I forget what it was, through the Supreme Court where they were saying that when the woman is drunk, it means that she's not able to give consent. And so getting into that sort of topic, because what sexual assault is basically is forcing sex upon a person without their consent. And generally, as I said, women are usually the ones that are being pushed into this.
Yeah, there are obviously a few cases of men being sexually assaulted by other men.
Yeah, and even there's lesbian rape too.
That's okay. That's a good question.
Yeah.
But it is rare, But here, the allegation of rape comes from a woman.
Yeah, and this is what it is 95% of the time.
Yeah. So it's that the allegation is that a man raped her.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see, and the interesting thing is that while we're talking about this from the purely criminal perspective, also we've seen sexual assault cases being tried in the Landlord and Tenant Board and other places, right?
Yep. I've dealt with sexual harassment cases through the Human Rights Tribunal, through a small claims case. Peter and I did a major case that we won, by the way, on a case of sexual battery, and we won that in favor of our clients. So there's a lot of things that could be done with things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a small claims court case, right? So that's an interesting one. Okay, so we were talking about differentials that will come into play. So, for example, does an age difference matter? And clearly, yes, there is a question about age. First of all, is that with any adult having sex with any underage person, we're not talking about that here. That's pedophilia. Yeah. That's not whether there's consent given. That's an entirely different question. It's out of the scope of this discussion.
Yeah, like this song, like say there's a 14-year-old and then there's a 16-year-old involved. Hey, we're talking in here where we're talking about adults for the most part here.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is, let's say, a 35-year-old man having sex with a 22-year-old woman, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Does age make a difference? Would an allegation of rape in that or sexual assault in that matter change anything?
It may, depending on the range of the age difference, and also more particularly, there is the consent issue. And are there aggravating factors involved in the act of the sexual assault?
Okay, so in that regard, what's an aggravating factor? For example, if you're talking about, let's say, two similar level employees at the office Christmas party, getting into the photocopying room and having their way with one another. while being completely drunk, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And again, these things could result in issues in the workplace,
Of course.
lawsuits,
Yeah, of
human
course.
rights suits, sexual assault cases in the workplace, which could do it.
But
But
in
in a
terms
criminal
of,
matter, it's possible that the woman of the two, if she wants to, she can start crying rape. But it's depending on a lot of factors whether this becomes a
well,
criminal matter or whether it becomes strictly a civil matter within the workplace.
yeah, and one of the key factors here is that typically, and it all depends upon every individual, but typically men are 10 to 20% larger than typical women. Right? Most men are 10 to 20% larger than most women, and they generally have more strength than most women. That
Mhm.
said, hey, there was a lady who I was friends with back when I was a kid, when I was young. That I'm not fighting her. I'm going the other way because she'll knock me through that window in an instant, right?
Mhm.
She was training to become a fire person, so I'm not having to go. I'm not fighting her, right? Let's be blunt about that. But again, it's generally accepted that men have a strength advantage and a size advantage over most men have a size advantage and strength advantage over most women.
Absolutely. And this can cause issues, particularly in itself. Like as I stated earlier, that this is about power. It's not about wanting to get it on
Well,
with somebody.
rape is about rape is a power differential anyway.
Yeah.
And as much as people complain about it as being a sexual thing, it's not. It's a power struggle anyway, and that's of course whereby men become, generally speaking, that strength that men have it helps them take control in a particular situation.
Hmm. And
And and then there was another question. There's another question, particularly when it comes to things like serial rapists, because they're particularly people who are skilled at control.
yeah, and they actually take this control and they actually get pleasure out of doing this.
Yeah,
They
and
just they have
well,
and get into situations and they know how to create a situation where they can do this.
yeah. Okay, so moving in, are there any other issues in that regard about age differentials?
Not really.
And I suppose that again, although it isn't counted as rape, but let's just go this one: a 25-year-old man who's a virgin, who gets propositioned by a 40-year-old woman. Is there an age differential issue there?
Possibly. I guess some people do that. Some women are cradle stealers or the more positive term cougars. Right?
Okay, cougars typically though, they are looking, they are women who are typically 50s to 60s who are looking for 30s to 40s men, right? That's a whole different ball game than what we've just been
Mhm.
talking about
Yeah.
though, right?
Yeah. But when I look at that kind of thing, like I'm not saying that this is abnormal. It's happened where people have been able to form relationships between age groups that way. But I find it very odd that there could be a generational difference in certain ways. But when somebody is pulling this sort of thing, and it becomes an issue, particularly if the woman is in any kind of position of power over the men, whether they're a
Yeah.
teacher, a professor, an employer, landlord, something like that, that could
Okay,
create.
landlord, and that's actually an interesting proposition when you're talking about landlord or a landlord and tenant arrangement, because hearing allegations like a few weeks ago about the tenant basically saying, "Hey, the landlord wants me to have sex with him as part of the payment of the rent."
Yeah, that happens.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does.
And these are allegations that also have to be backed up and proven. Okay, because you're making the allegation, and yes, it has to be heard, but it has to be proven. And the person who is being accused of has a right to a defense. Okay, but what we're finding now is that there seems to be a lot of automatic assumptions. Okay, and like to some extent there may be some truth in it, but a lot of people are saying, "Oh, listen to the woman; she's always right." No, not necessarily.
Well, and
especially when you're talking about date rape cases, there's women who go out with somebody and they date them for a while, and I guess they get to having sexual relations, and then they break up for whatever reason or get into an argument. Then suddenly this guy sexually assaulted her, and they'll go to the police and everything. They'll go to all of these steps, and this is very common.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things that can get hurt. And then there's disputes between who, in a workplace, if you put a man and a woman working closely together, if anything happens, there always is concern. But, I mean, this is the kind of thing that people can't be adults.
Well, okay, so employment, you've gotten onto employment status there.
Yep.
And clearly, for example, a CEO dating a 22-year-old recruit, there's a major employment status difference there.
Yeah.
Right? And
it could be a very serious issue. Even if the 22-year-old said, "Hey, I like this."
Yeah.
Like he's my sugar daddy, right?
And even if you were talking about a 22-year-old guy dating the CEO who's 60+ female.
Yeah,
right? Same issue.
He has a power status too.
Yeah, because there's a power status differential there.
Because if you don't do this or don't go along with this, I can always arrange to have you removed. There's a lot of that going on, which is really not, it's a sign of an unhealthy workplace. And there could be some serious allegations, serious repercussions for when that happens. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of workplaces develop this workplace dating policy where they basically some of them don't allow it at all. And then there's others who try to sign love contracts, saying, okay, we're dating, we got to disclose, but okay, I'm going to put you in this department and you in that department so you don't talk to each other during the workday, although you can do it out of work. I mean, there's a lot of that type of thing going on.
That's a sensible thing anyway, but you're not talking about rape here. You're just talking about relationships.
Yeah, just relationships. And the thing is, it's always how it's thought about when these relationships go wrong. That's always what has to be thought about.
Well, I was going to say, the challenge is, of course, for many people, you think about it, outside of your sleeping hours, work is probably the time when you're going to spend most time together. So apart from, let's say, an 8-hour shift, if you're doing an 8-hour shift, some people don't do 8-hour shifts, they may do more or whatever. But very often it's like, well, you go out for drinks with your work colleagues, on the Friday night. Right? That type of thing. So employment definitely has a major impact in here, and employment policies about not dating or only dating people of a similar level. For example, a store manager in a box store might be told not to date an employee, a normal employee, a cashier or something like that. But again, that might be different if, for example, the store manager decides, hey, there's some I've got a need for cashiers. My wife's a brilliant cashier. Why don't I give the an application form, because she's out of work right now and looking for a job. Why don't give her an application form, because she's sure as hell going to get the job. No interference here, of course. We're talking
like you cannot have a say in it. They have to have other people.
Out of the entire engagement process, but
Yeah.
she gets employed. There's no need in that instance to break up because it's known about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just an issue that has to be determined outside of the individual manager.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, I mean, these things are all stuff that get put into place and so forth. And different companies have different policies.
Yeah.
And
as long as you're not breaking the policy,
experience, you deal with this all the time. Right? There's always issues that people deal with, and they have to be dealt with very sensitively.
And again, another one of these comes along with people who are in positions of responsibility. Let's say, like a pastor or a pastor in a church or or a doctor, that kind of thing. These are all people who we kind of look up to in our society and assume them to be in a position of responsibility, but they could be the one who's perpetrating a sexual assault, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could. And this has gone on for years for different cases, and they're only discovering sometimes many years later that this has been taking place.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how this happens.
And okay, so about the relationship between the alleged perpetrator and the alleged victim, what were you thinking about that? What's your thoughts about that?
It depends on what, who is the perpetrator to the victim? Is it somebody that they know? Is it somebody that has a fiduciary responsibility to that victim?
Yeah.
Is it somebody that has a position of trust, like a teacher, for example?
Yeah.
Or a doctor or a priest or somebody like that? That person.
Well, okay,
that would be not very good to get involved with.
Okay, but for example, you said teacher there, and I'm just going to take this example. A father of somebody who's at school dating the teacher of his children. Any issues there?
Not necessarily, although I think the children would be uncomfortable.
The children might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't lead to any particular legal issues per se, does it?
Not necessarily. Like as long as there's no favoritism or perception of favoritism shown towards the children.
Well, how can that, okay, so I understand what you're saying, that the children are getting higher grades because the mother or father is actually dating the teacher.
Yeah,
I said father before but I
was
and
the teacher gives the kids all A's, like
suddenly, from last term they were all D's. Now the parents are dating the teacher. Now they're all A's. Yeah, that's a significant.
So these are things that have to be considered, so they cannot allow that to happen. Sometimes I think what happens is they have to get somebody else to mark some of the papers. Okay? Like I remember I was in the university. I was good friends with two of my professors. And I took a couple of the courses that one of the professors taught. And he told me, he says, I cannot mark any of your papers. I have to pass it on to someone else. Right? Yeah. And he was one of these people who has to be squeaky clean. Everything's got to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
But he was all right, and said, that's fine. That's fine. I want it to be fair. Yeah. Right? Like we weren't in a dating relationship or anything, but we were just friends. Like we had a group. You
were more than teacher
activities together.
Yeah, you were more than teacher and student.
Yeah.
You had those shared activities that might kind of put somebody to ask a question, but there was nothing sexual in it.
Yeah, there's nothing sexual. It was just there was just a group of us who did a bunch of things, and I just happened to be at the university. I had the time.
And exactly, you had
his teaching and everything. Then he got me into some of these other groups and work that he was involved with, and then these other people also became friends too. So this was just a part of an example of it. So, and then afterwards, I remember I took one of the classes, and he says, if you take that class, he says, I have to get someone else to mark it. because I can't mark it. I said, I know, I realize it.
Yeah.
I said, whatever you
But
have.
when we're talking rape or sexual assault here, the relationship between the alleged perpetrator and victim can actually be. This is actually what leads often to, particularly with things like pedophile situations where
Yeah, pedophiles too, like teachers, like your school teachers.
Yeah.
And going after young students who are under 18. Hello, Robert. I expected you. I was just waiting for you to come on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And this is and I think that is an aggravating factor in any kind of sexual assault case when the alleged perpetrator has a position of power over the victim.
Yeah, we talked about it in relation to like age differences, in relation to employment status, and you're right, and that's the same for things like teachers and students. Even when the teacher and student are not in, neither of them is when the student is not underage.
Yep, exactly. There has been situations where even a teacher getting involved, but they would not be their students, for example, but maybe students of another class, but that still is looked upon very badly.
Well, it's generally speaking, I think most colleges don't like to see teachers and students, even if it's like you teach history and the student's a geography teacher, and you come together, you know, at the bookshop, and you didn't even know, and neither of them knew that those particular individuals were at the college, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Those kind of situations, even there, that's innocent sounding, but even there, very often, a lot of teachers are actually asked, well, if that situation arises, you will remove yourself from the relationship.
Absolutely.
Right?
Because this happens because it could get serious, it could get problematic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so going back to the question on rape and sexual assault, so if a man in that whole question where we were originally, where they're both drunk, so what happens if the man invites the lady to his apartment? Let's say they're students, and then the student digs, and he invites her to his student digs,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It also depends on whether he's alone, what his plans are, but sometimes it's implied that this is what's going to happen. Hey, that it's going to end up in a date.
Okay, so implied that this is what's going to happen. I think we need to explore that one a little bit.
Hey, Robert.
Right? Because implied that something is going to happen. And for example, it's like, so young man takes young woman, they're blasted out of their minds at the bar, and he whispers in her ear and says, hey, I fancy you. How about we go to my place and we fuck our brains out all night, okay? And she replies instantly, yeah, that would be a great thing, right?
Great idea.
Great idea, right? So they head off back to his apartment and and do it. Then of course she wakes up in the morning and she went, I slept with that. Oh my God.
God.
What was I doing? He must have raped me.
Yep, and this is one of the problems people can get into, right? And especially people use dating apps and different things. We're trying to tell people, be very careful, meet in a public place, start getting to know the person better before you start engaging in any kind of seriousness.
And there's a difference, of course, with when we talked about the man invited the lady to his apartment, because in fact, actually, this is where that power differential potentially comes into play, because the male's 10 to 20% larger than the female, and 10 to 20% stronger than the female on the average. And we're talking averages here, not individuals, right? So that has a potential impact here, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has potential problem, and to be aware of that. This is one of the things where it could happen. It's kind of like a date rape type of thing.
Yeah. In that situation where she says this is rape, is she going to be believed?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, right? Because you have to kind of prove that there was no consent in this situation.
Yeah.
Right? Was he putting something in her that would be non-consensual? It's different if they're both at a party at another person's place, and then they go into some back alley, and then the guy starts doing his thing. There is a lot of differences in how the circumstances might determine whether there was consent or not.
Okay. Well, and put another, that's a fair question. And okay, did you, so Robert's saying, did you just say that out loud, Peter?
Oh my God, Peter.
Yeah, why not? I was being colloquial, you know that.
Colloquial, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so is there a difference then? We just talked about the man inviting the lady to his apartment. Okay, so the lady invites the man to her apartment. The thing I wonder here is there an implicit yes in this?
It depends, of the relationship that the woman has with the man.
Yep.
But what I've found is when people are dating and they live in different places, that if they're going to be going to one of the apartments, the guy often goes to the lady's apartment if they're going to be doing anything. When I've dealt with landlord and tenant situations where the woman always has her boyfriend over, that sort of thing. I mean, she can have her boyfriend over all she wants, I mean, there's nothing.
And the landlord can do nothing about it.
They can do nothing about it, but quite often it is the man that goes to the woman's apartment, because usually the man is a mess and he leaves everything all over the place in his apartment, and the lady is clean, and at night keeps everything clean.
Oh, you're being sexist there, Angela.
I know, but this is what I've found with a lot of the.
But again,
okay,
so in terms of the allegation of rape or sexual assault, where the lady invited the man over to her apartment, they were both drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an implicit yes in here?
That can possibly put her in a worse position in terms of trying to make an argument that she has been victimized.
And again, okay, so they go to her.
Like if she was really not wanting to do something, she can say, "Okay, get out of here," and if he doesn't leave, call the police.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say that was my next move in that direction, because I was going to say, okay, we talked about the average differential between men and women. Again, if he tries to force her into her apartment and force her to have sex with him, right, that makes a difference. And you're right.
Exactly. And the guy's not going to go around and call the police. If she goes to his apartment. Or even if she tries to put him on or try to put the come on him, he's not going to call the police.
Yeah, and there's a typical difference between men and women, right? And again, we talked about that at the beginning, where essentially, if a woman doesn't want to do it, she feels raped, whereas a man essentially feels lucky if he got it.
I got lucky last night.
Yeah, and he might not say with whom, but he might just say, "I got lucky last night."
Yeah, right? I picked up a chick last night. Yeah, that's all he'll say.
Yeah, and there is a difference in mental approach on these things, right? And that's the important. I think the important factor. That's where there might well be a distinction between the man inviting the lady to his apartment and the lady inviting the man to her apartment. I think that's.
But I think some of that may be changing too, because I think men are starting to become more aware of some of these things. Like some of the men, they may say, like, I don't want to be forced into a kind of relationship. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yep. Yeah, some of them can say like like some of the men don't want to be forced into a relationship. So you have some kind of older woman saying, "Oh," and going after a male, trying to say, "Oh, can you your place or mine?" That sort of thing. And some men just said, "No, I don't want to." Hey, I've got a girlfriend, or I'm not interested. That sort of thing. Hey. Some guys, I mean, they start feeling like, and it could be very emotionally disturbing for a fella.
Mm, okay. Okay. Yeah, and there are some. I think things are starting to change, as you quite rightly say. Okay, so then there's another question that really matters about all of this: is when does no mean no?
Absolutely. The minute a person says no, or I'm not interested, or I'm not coming over, hey, no, not today, stop, get off of me, get out.
Yeah, because there's a lot put up on this one in criminal cases across the world. That it's often been said, "Oh, she said no, but she really meant do it harder."
Yeah, that's what used to happen with date rape because there was Queen's University. They came across a big controversy a few years ago where there was a lot of that stuff going on at Queen's, and a lot of the students were involved in date rapes, and all the women, they were just petrified, and they made complaints about it. So women said no means no, and the men put up signs, just kind of jokingly said no means more beer, no means more, it's more, no means more, try harder, that sort of thing. Right? And that was very, very insulting, and that was well publicized and saying we have to stop this and have to educate people about this type of situation. And this sort of happens on university campuses, college campuses, some workplaces that are not well educated or well staffed with human resource skilled people.
I was going to
These are
say,
things that people have to kind of be aware of, that this people have these things, and that there's certain kinds of behavior where you have to act like adults.
okay, then the other question is one of date rape, because with many situations, that's got to be the toughest for a jury or a judge to actually make a decision upon, because they went to bed together, they were perfectly happy to go to bed together, and then they wake up in the morning and it's like, he raped me. And
Yeah.
particularly when we're talking about things that might well happen with, let's say, movie stars or celebrities or football stars or um, admirals of the fleet. Well,
Yeah.
he was an officer at the time, but
Yeah.
you
We
know
hear about this all the time.
and some question
Cosby,
about what's called Me
and then
Too.
that director, that guy who was done that with date rape. But there's and that Peter, that designer Nygaard, hey, and even Frank Stronach.
Yeah,
All these people are now being accused of sexually assaulting them
yeah.
at some age, some of them in the 80s or the 90s. So suddenly now they're coming up with allegations against these people, and they're going to court because there's no statute of limitations on these things. So it's very difficult. This Nygaard, he had his heard, of course, his case is heard, and he was found guilty, and then he now is appealing them.
Well, that's
And
actually
even Donald Trump, I mean, they could. I don't know. She didn't lay charges. She sued Donald Trump and she won.
yeah,
Jean Carroll. Okay, so
yeah,
he was found liable of rape against this one woman. And then there's other people, movie stars, Harvey Weinstein, who was a director, and a lot of the actresses at that time were going around, and they started a movement called Me Too.
yeah.
Okay, that when someone starts talking about this guy did this to me, and they start talking about their experience, then someone starts recounting having a similar experience, and they say, "Me too." I had that experience too, and also with the same guy. So they're coming out like this. And while it's good, people can talk about it, but it's
question at
also
hand,
risky.
you see, the question at hand with one of these was retired Vice Admiral Hayden Edmondson, who, when he was selected for a government post to do with COVID about 3 years ago, to do with COVID, getting COVID vaccines out there, somebody came forward and accused him of rape and sexual assault more than 30 years ago, back in the 90s, when he was an officer in the Canadian Navy, and subsequently, he was found not guilty, but again, he lost a prime job because of the allegations.
Never mind the reputational damage that carries on after that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because
that's why I think when they have these, there's got to be some way of screening these types of allegations before they go public.
Yeah.
Because some of them are just people who are revengeful. And like somebody didn't get a modeling contract with Peter Nygaard, so they're going to say, "Oh, he raped me in the 1980s."
Yeah, and I understand why celebrities and well-known people like Donald Trump get allegations against them, and often these allegations are not that true.
Yeah, and that's
found unsubstantive.
Yeah, like this is why I say there needs to be an investigation into them, and then only the ones that may have some truth, they can get brought forward. Okay, because it seems to me that sometimes people just open their mouth and say, "Oh, me too. I got sexually assaulted by the same guy.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to star in this movie and this producer, he did this to me too. He told me I'll lose the part if I don't go along with it, or something, like there's a lot of that. And that actually happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but
exactly.
The thing is, it can be carried on to an nth degree.
Yeah.
Where it could be actually more harmful to take that and then use this, because we've encountered situations even in our own office where the word of somebody without any other corroborating evidence stood against somebody, a man, okay, because somebody said, "Oh, well, this man sexually assaulted me," not even raped, that the person maybe nudged against them in a wrong way or something. And it's
or actually carried their water bottle in the wrong location.
Yeah, it could have been anything. Like I don't know. Like none of us were there at the time.
Exactly.
But the people who were there, it didn't seem to have any kind of consequence until several months later. Then the person gets a notice that he's been evicted because he committed a crime on the premises.
And the worst
no police reports, nothing.
No police reports, nothing, and no requirement to go to court for
to test the allegations.
Yeah.
And these allegations, we weren't able to test them.
Yeah.
Okay? You need to test these allegations, because if you're being accused of something, you have a right to question these allegations. Okay? Like backwards, forwards, and this time till Sunday, you have a right to question these allegations. Okay? It doesn't mean that when you question these allegations, you have to put down the woman and start questioning her sex life with everybody else. It's only with you. Only with the accused. Okay? Because the thing is, I remember when that law was changed in Parliament 1983 or something, or 84, and it was Justice Minister Mark McGuigan. I'm trying to remember who it was. And he changed it. He said, okay, a woman can have sex and consent to sex with an entire football team except one. But that one person, she could decide, I don't want to have sex with him for whatever reason. Maybe the guy's an idiot, and she could say no. Right? Then if he tries to force it on her, yes, that could be rape. Because I remember that was discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And then he passed that legislation. And it's very important that when we're talking about the concept of consent, this is where a lot of this comes into law. People have consent for all sorts of things, like the Bedford case. Guys went in and they got whipped and chained and everything else with Terry Bedford, who was a kind of dominatrix prostitute. And they did this unconsensually. But yet they were saying, oh, they've been found in Body House or whatever it was. And then they went to court all the way up and saying about prostitution. Prostitution is not illegal. Okay? And what Terry Bedford did with her guys was all a consenting exercise.
Yeah.
Okay? Regardless of what you think about.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, we all get so hung up on Victorian morals, or the morals of our former lands that dictate that thou shalt not do this stuff.
Yeah.
That we forget that there are people out there that do this stuff.
Yeah, and this is stuff that they consent to. They know what they're getting into when they go into, I forget what she called her place.
And it may not be, it may not be your thing. It may not be my thing, but it's somebody else's thing.
Yeah.
And
somebody has that, and for some reason they enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? They don't get hurt by it. It's done in a way that doesn't hurt people, but it's pretty interesting for people to get involved. There's a whole community built on that.
Yeah, plus also those dominatrix type things. Usually there's a safe exit word.
Yeah, they discuss what their safety is, their safety net, before they start, and if they want to stop, they can stop anytime.
Yeah, they just say the word and they're out.
Yeah, that's it, and they're very good. These are very professional people. They do this, and the thing is, if somebody tries to go forward or tries to do something dangerous and hurt the person, then that's outside of the consent boundaries.
Yeah.
So this is where we talk about consent and why it's an important issue.
And in fact, actually, with things like dominatrix, I've heard stories, and I don't, heard stories only through watching TV programs, that one particular dominatrix used to actually have her client sign a contract.
Yep.
Was specific about safe words, etc.
Yep. Safe words. They think what happens, also what kinds of acts they are willing to participate in.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Precisely.
And this got all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, because some Victorian person decided that no, you can't get involved in that stuff.
Yeah.
But you're not going to outlaw this. You're not going to get rid of this. So it's better to work on consent, make sure people are cared for, that the people aren't getting hurt, and setting it up. And the people who are involved in these things are very, very careful, and they will not hurt you if you don't want to get hurt. This is it's an interesting thing, and this came into another law afterwards, which was passed, which now it's against a lot of bisex. It's not against a lot of cell sex, but it's against a lot of bisex. Taking the example from Sweden, I think, and I think that still pushes it underground. But
I think that's I think that's a bad move. But
it's a bad move, because the thing is, if somebody wants to go to someone who's offering sex, and then that person wants to buy, that's not my business or yours.
No, exactly. That's up to them, and it's not for us to get involved. And generally speaking, I'm not.
As long as it doesn't include minors.
Yeah, exactly. That's about the only. I think there's limits on that sort of thing, and if you don't want to be involved in it, don't be involved in it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all there is to it, right?
Yeah, stay away from the body houses.
Okay, and let's wrap this up, if I may. So you've been listening to this special edition, number 40 of Has Been Legal, talking about rape and sexual assault. But please note that neither Angela and I nor will practice in criminal law, so we can't really help you. We were commenting because of our knowledge through our LLB courses that we've had, and through knowledge of case law, etc., etc.
Yeah, like we read things, and we also come up with topics of interest because people are interested in hearing your thoughts on these things.
This was a topic that was sent to us by email. So we had a long, hard discussion about whether we would include it today, but we decided to. So there we go.
Yeah, because a lot of these things are not necessarily to give you and say, hey, this is what you should do. Hey, some of them are just like topics that are in the news. for
Yeah.
people, because
I think
sometimes
that's
things
where,
happen, and people want to know what our thoughts are on it.
yeah, and I think that's where this topic led from. The individual was talking about something that was in the news a few weeks ago and asked this question. Okay, so generally speaking, if you need legal advice, you can contact Invictus Legal, but not on this type of matter, right? And you can do so on 905-688-5598. And you can email Angela at weareinvictus.legal or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal. Or you can visit our website at https weareinvictus.legal. There you go, all one word or two words. And then we do have, okay, so Robert says thank you.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Robert. And then we lead up to Angela's very favorite part of the show.
So what you heard today on Spin Legal, is a lot of opinion. But whether this show or other shows in the series, this is not legal advice. We don't provide legal advice on this show because we got many, many listeners, and some of the listeners, we don't know who you are. Okay? So this is something that doesn't address people's specific issues. Sometimes people tell us they want to hear us talk about something, but it's more or less what are our thoughts on it, and where does it fit within the law and the legal context and so forth. But it's not legal advice at all. And some of these things that we comment on are not necessarily things we practice in, but we're commenting on things that we know are happening, and many of these things are in the news. So we come across an opinion and how that works. But if you really need some legal advice about any type of issue that you're facing, just give us a call, or you can call a paralegal or a lawyer, whoever, and then they can help you sort out your individual situation.
All right. And we're going to leave it at that point, and it's myself saying goodbye, and Angela, of course, is going to be